You can only really have victory in a war over a genocidal uh, regime, over a regime that is indoctrinated by some apocalyptic ideology, is to bring them to their knees, to actually defeat them. And defeat means that they know that they lost. See, one of the problems that we have in the West is that victories in warfare, we often define them by our own definition of what looks like victory. So Trump looks at what's happening in Iran and says, look, their navy's destroyed, their air force is destroyed, their army's destroyed, they've lost, we've won. Only problem is that the Iranian regime hasn't gotten the message. And I've been saying since before the war even started, if you've been watching this channel, you've heard me say it over and over again, that they don't care. In the end of the day, I mean, they care, but in the end of the day, they don't care how much damage is done. They don't care how much their people starve and how much their currency collapses and everything else. All that they care about is surviving, that they want to remain in power in some way, shape, or form when the dust settles and when the Americans lose their nerve. And from a negotiating perspective, their negotiating tactic forever, the Iranian regime's negotiating tactic is always to hold the line, not give in to anything, and wait and wait and wait and not give in to anything, because they know that eventually Westerners will always soften their demands, will always give in the effort to make a deal. And they see Trump wanting to make a deal. So with what's happened over the last week in the situation in the Straits of Hormuz, with Trump announcing Project Freedom, this plan to open up the straits, which then got paused because of pressure from the Saudis and other Gulf states. I made a video about that. You got to watch that to understand the dynamics of why that happened. All of this has emboldened the Iranian regime. Now, does that mean that they won't collapse, that they're winning? No, I'm not saying that at all. I mean, they're still strangled by this blockade, but this has not been progress for the American effort to bring down the Iranian regime, if that's what they're trying to do, or to bring them to the table to make some kind of deal, which is really a waste of time. But what we're going to do in this video is we're going to take a look at how the Iranians are interpreting everything that's happened over the last couple of days with this Project Freedom thing, why they're attacking the United Arab Emirates in their own words. We'll try to read between the lines of Iranian state media. So if you've been with this channel, you know that we do this every now and then. We take a look at what Iranian regime media is saying about a situation, and we use it as a window in to understanding what they're signaling, what they want, and we learn a lot from that. So let's get right to it. Let's take a look at how the Iranians are viewing the events of the last few days. Okay, so let's start with this headline from a couple days ago in WANA, Iranian state media. And again, if you've been with this channel, you know WANA well. This is from May 5th, a few days ago. What's behind the attack on the UAE, right? Everyone was wondering, why is Iran, in response to Project Freedom being launched, why did they attack the UAE? Just about 20 days after an undeclared ceasefire took hold, explosions have once again echoed across the Persian Gulf. This time, the United Arab Emirates has been targeted, attacks that many interpret as a direct message from Iran in the midst of a low-intensity, semi-covert conflict. Now, the many interpret is very common in Iranian regime media. We've seen it a lot, and you'll see it throughout these articles we're going to look at. Well, they'll say, people interpret, many interpret. And it's just their way of saying, this is what it means. But they want to make it sound like a news item that they're reporting. Reports from the UAE indicate a series of coordinated incidents across the country, from a missile strike targeting Dubai's port to a fire in Fujairah and disruptions to flight operations. Fujairah is the eastern port on the outside of the Strait of Hormuz coast of the UAE. That's where the oil pipeline that the UAE has to bypass the Straits of Hormuz. That's where it comes out. So they were targeting Fujairah. The Iranians were targeting Fujairah to prevent the UAE from being able to bypass the blockade of the Straits of Hormuz. At the same time, there are reports of maritime incidents and fires aboard several vessels near the Emirati coast. Authorities have confirmed the activation of air defense systems and a state of heightened alert. In the regional media space, these attacks have been widely attributed to Iran, although no clear or official confirmation has yet been released. We'll see that changed in the days that followed. These developments come against the backdrop of a broader confrontation. Then it talks about how, the original war and how it lasted 40 days, which they always mention. They always mention it lasted 40 days. It's very significant in Shiite Muslim culture, history, theology. It has great resonance, the 40 days. But let's take a look here. Here's what it says. However, no official end to the war has been announced. The situation remains in a neither war nor peace state, and at any moment, a return to open conflict remains possible. Okay, in other words, we're in this holding pattern, and that's all accurate. But look at this in red. This I've never seen before. A line in red. But what message do the recent attacks on the UAE carry? So here they're basically telling us these are the messages of the attacks on the UAE, and they give 4 messages of the attacks on the UAE. Number 1, a shift towards preemptive action by Iran. Some analysts believe Iran may have altered its approach, launching a preemptive strike, something it had not done previously. In this view, the attacks represent limited targeted actions rather than and then there's a Persian word here, which means beginning. I don't know, I guess in the translator that they ran this article through, it didn't translate one of the words. So in this view, the attacks represent limited targeted actions rather than the beginning of a full-scale war. Still, there is no definitive information, and the exact scenario remains unclear for now. Okay, so number 1, meaning behind the attacks on the UAE, which were at this point not confirmed coming from Iran, is preemptive action by Iran, that they've moved to a new preemptive strike mentality. Number 2, drawing a red line over disputed islands. One key interpretation centers on Iran's islands in the Persian Gulf. There are suggestions that threats or even plans regarding these islands may have emerged. The attacks in this context serve as a warning to the UAE as a potential backer of such a scenario. This would explain why the nature of the strikes appears more like signaling than escalation, aimed at sending a message, not triggering an all-out war. Let me explain what this is about. So this is the Strait of Hormuz. Here is the UAE. This is the UAE right here. Here's Dubai and Abu Dhabi. This is the UAE. And of course, on the other side of the strait is Iran. Now, there are all these little islands in here, and I want to show you a few of them. Okay, there are 3 particular islands that are in dispute. Okay, and they are Abu Musa right here, Abu Musa, and then Greater Tunb right here, Greater Tunb, this one, and then this little guy, which is called Lesser Tunb. So Greater and Lesser Tunb and Abu Musa, these 3 islands. Now, what's significant about these 3 islands? First of all, you can tell that these islands are in very strategic locations. Okay, 1, 2, 3, right here. These 3 islands were seized by Iran in 1971 when the British left the area and the UAE and Bahrain also received their independence. Okay, when they received their independence, shortly before that, right around the time that the British were leaving, the Iranian military, and this was before the Iranian Islamic Revolution, this is under the Shah, they went in and they seized these islands. And the Western powers, the United States and Britain, kind of winked and allowed it to happen and saw it as a positive, actually, and didn't do anything about it. The bottom line is this. These 3 little islands, Abu Musa, Greater Tunb, and Lesser Tunb, are claimed by the UAE as UAE territory that was unlawfully taken by Iran. The Iranians claim it as Iranian territory. So what this is saying, this is a very interesting passage in this article, because you haven't heard anything about this in the media, but what this passage in this article, and let's remember, we are reading Iranian state media. These are not news items. This is the Iranian regime putting out messaging. Okay, and here what they're saying is this is a warning to the UAE. It's kind of like saying, hey, we see what you're doing here. And what they're worried about is in this whole process of the United States taking control of the Strait of Hormuz and pushing back the Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz. And they're worried that the UAE, that has always claimed that these islands are illegally occupied by Iran and belong to them, they're worried that the UAE is going to try to make a move to seize these islands. Okay, that's what this is about. That's what this passage is about. Very interesting. Number 3, tied to the U.S. plan in the Strait of Hormuz. Another significant angle relates to the new U.S. initiative, which Donald Trump has referred to as the Freedom Project, okay, or Project Freedom. According to his statements, the U.S. intends to carry out an operation to ensure safe passage for a large number of ships that have been stranded in the Gulf for weeks, over 60 days, due to rising tensions. Okay, so and that if the UAE has played a role in supporting or facilitating this plan, it may explain why it has become a target. It may explain why. Some analysts, therefore, see the attacks as an attempt to influence or disrupt the Strait of Hormuz initiative. Okay, so far we have 3 reasons. Let's just recap where we are. A shift towards preemptive action, drawing a red line over disputed islands, tied to the project, trying to scuttle Project Freedom, and a response to economic pressure. There's also economic dimension. Pressure on the UAE could be a response to its role in restricting Iranian assets. According to this view, the UAE has cooperated financially with the United States in ways that have impacted Iran's currency market. The current developments may signal that Iran is shifting from economic response to field level or kinetic action. Okay, the attacks on the UAE must be viewed within a broader picture of a war that hasn't really ended, a fragile ceasefire, and actors simultaneously sending signals while avoiding direct confrontation. Okay, let me sum up this piece. What they're signaling here, these aren't, this is some analysts think, okay, this is the regime saying that we are targeting the UAE because A, this could be preemptive. They see the UAE making moves, aligning more with Israel, and a preemptive strike on America basically the way they're doing it is a preemptive strike. They're attacking the UAE. So it's a preemptive strike because one of the things Trump has been saying this whole time is, if they don't make a deal, we're going to start dropping bombs. So they're saying, okay, we're making a preemptive strike. Second thing is to protect these islands, signaling to the UAE, don't touch them. Third thing, to disrupt Project Freedom. Third reason. And fourth reason is a response to the UAE, retaliating against the UAE for its economic warfare against the regime. Okay, and then we have this piece from yesterday. Trump's back down from the Freedom Project in the face of Iran's new power equation. And this is a longer analytical piece, whatever. It's a longer piece talking about how Trump backed down, right? Because again, watch my other video on the pressure from the Saudis and the other Gulf states for the United States to not do a Project Freedom. The UAE was not reportedly part of that pressure, but the other Gulf states were, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia principally, and Pakistan also. And it says here, in an unexpected turn, Donald Trump announced early Wednesday that the escort operation in the Strait of Hormuz, dubbed Project Freedom, would be temporarily suspended. And then Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, he responded on social media, and he said, all talks are making progress with Pakistan's gracious effort. The U.S. should be wary of being dragged back into a quagmire by ill wishers. So should the UAE. See, they're shaking a finger at the UAE. They're calling out the UAE more. The White House had previously emphasized that the Freedom Project was separate from other U.S. military measures. However, its rapid suspension just hours after the launch has been widely interpreted as a sign of either a lack of consensus or operational impracticality. At the international level, the initiative also faced limited support. It talks about some of the allies of the United States who were opposed to it. It ridicules Trump for declaring victory and saying that there's a great success. While Washington has attempted to frame the decision as part of diplomatic progress, developments on the ground suggest a different narrative. In the days leading up to the suspension, Iran issued explicit warnings that any attempt to alter navigation rules in the Strait of Hormuz or introduce foreign military presence would be met with a direct response. This stance effectively sent a clear deterrent signal. Mohammad Ghalibaf, Speaker of Iran's parliament, wrote on X, a new equation in the Strait of Hormuz is taking shape. The continuation of the current situation is unbearable for the United States. We have not even begun yet. Meanwhile, a brief but striking remark by a spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry drew particular attention. Responding to a question about why Iran does not back down in the face of a global superpower like the United States, the spokesperson simply stated, "We are a superpower too." It is evident that Iran's diplomatic tone has shifted significantly after the war. Part of this change was visible in recent remarks by senior officials, as well as in the evolving rhetoric of the foreign ministry. The shift reflects a transition from defensive diplomacy to language rooted in the projection of hard power. Okay, look at that. What played a decisive role in halting the Freedom Project was not diplomacy alone, but a combination of field pressure and Iran's refusal to yield. Now look at this next sentence, so revealing. When one side demonstrates a willingness to bear the cost of confrontation, the other is forced to recalculate, a pattern that had already emerged at the end of the 2-week ceasefire period between Iran and the United States. That is such a revealing sentence. They're saying what their strategy is. And this is what I said at the beginning of this video and what I've been saying since before the war. Their demonstration of the willingness to bear the cost of confrontation, their willingness to absorb the damage of the American strikes. When they show that willingness, they see this, Trump's always like, why aren't they backing down? Why aren't they giving in? They've been destroyed. They're desperate for a deal. And the frustration that the Americans have shown all along, why aren't they making a deal? We've caused so much damage to them. We're threatening more damage to them. We're killing all their leadership. Why don't they give in? Look what it says here. I'm going to read it again. When one side demonstrates a willingness to bear the cost of confrontation, the other side is forced to recalculate. So they're saying, as long as we hold out, and we hold out no matter how hard it is, no matter how much we're enduring, if we hold out and we bear the cost of confrontation, we force them to recalculate. And that is, as far as they're concerned, a leverage. That is success in pushing back in the decision-making, in the negotiation. After the ceasefire deadline expired, Trump declared it would not be extended and warned that if Iran did not surrender, it would face destruction. So they're giving an example now, right? The deadline expired. Trump said it won't be extended. And if Iran doesn't surrender, we're going to destroy it. What happened? Iran resisted the pressure. They refused even the ceasefire framework and signaled readiness for confrontation, ultimately leading Trump to walk back his position. This time, it was not negotiation, but resistance that altered the course. More precisely, it was the combination of on-the-ground resilience and hard signaling. In other words, by attacking the UAE, by showing real resistance, we've caused him to back down again. Think about it. He announces Project Freedom. We attack the UAE. Then Trump announces that he's suspending Project Freedom. You see that? Or he said that after the 2-week ceasefire, he's not going to extend it and we're going to go back to fighting. We held our ground, and then he extended it. He's backing down. He's blinking. Iran's refusal to yield, even at moments, I'm reading again, Iran's refusal to yield, even at moments when flexibility was expected, has become a recurring pattern that directly influences Washington's behavior. The swift suspension of the Freedom Project is a continuation of that pattern. This is such a revealing piece. Look at that. They're saying that their strategy is working. Rather than a temporary measure, the halt of the initiative is increasingly interpreted as, quote, or as I should say, as bolded, this is a bolded line, a practical indication of the limits of U.S. maneuverability in the Strait of Hormuz, where any military move is immediately tied to the risk of direct confrontation. Trump does not want more military confrontation. He does not want more escalation. That's becoming clear, and they're exploiting that. They're digging in, and even, launching some missiles and drones at the UAE, and the Americans do nothing. And they're saying, you see, he's backing down. We're holding the line. The development comes as the Strait of Hormuz remains a vital artery of global energy supply, etc. And look what it says at the end. Washington attempted to rewrite the rules of passage through display of power, but in less than 2 days, it was compelled to accept those very rules. The question is now is whether such a project can ever be implemented without accepting the equation imposed by Iran. Look at that's a very revealing piece. And then we have this from today, why the UAE has become one of Iran's main targets. And in this piece, they lay out the various reasons why they're attacking the UAE. So let's check this piece out. Why has the small desert state of the United Arab Emirates, located in the southern shores of the Persian Gulf, become one of the primary targets of Iranian missile and drone attacks? Notice 2 days earlier, they said it's not confirmed that Iran attacked them. And now they are confirming it. They're saying, yes, we've confirmed it. And by the way, this is the front page piece in today's WANA. And it says the answer lies in the policies and conduct of the UAE, right? And what does it say? That they've moved closer to Israel. They've become one of the pillars of U.S.-backed regional order. And they rely increasingly on the American security umbrella. There's a growing presence of U.S. troops. At the same time, the enormous wealth has been used by the UAE to project influence beyond its borders. It mentions Yemen and Sudan and Syria. These are all places where the UAE is on the other side of Iranian interests and jihadist interests. The UAE's role as of a financial backer of U.S. military presence and a partner in certain Israeli security initiatives has become more pronounced. So they're in bed with Israel. They have more and more security and economic ties with the United States. They have THAAD missile defense systems. Look at this. Reports have additionally pointed to the activities of intelligence facilities linked to the Mossad and the CIA near Iran's coastline. That might be true. According to reports by the Financial Times, parts of Israel's air defense infrastructure have been integrated into the UAE's security network, positioning Abu Dhabi alongside American bases in efforts to counter Iranian drones. And they quote an Iranian parliament member. Look at this. Iranian parliament member Manusher Motaki has also stated that there is evidence suggested the involvement of Emirati drones in attacks against Iran. Look at that. They also blame the UAE for the attack on the oil facilities on the last day of the war, when there was an attack on the oil facilities on Lavon Island. They're saying that that was an Emirati jet that did it, which I don't think is accurate, but that's what they're claiming. Taken together alongside recurring territorial disputes over Iranian islands, that's what I explained before, those 3 islands, and long-standing disagreements regarding the name of the Persian Gulf, right? Because the Arab states call it the Arabian Gulf. Supporters of this argument believe these developments explain why the UAE has increasingly been viewed in Tehran as a potential target for military retaliation. From this perspective, the UAE is no longer seen merely as a peripheral regional actor, but rather as part of a broader anti-Iran regional coalition, one that is still rumored to be willing to financially support future American military action against Iran. Nevertheless, advocates of this position argue that Iran's military response during the first phase of the Ramadan War, that's what they call this war, sent a clear warning to regional states about the costs of aligning with Tehran's adversaries. In other words, UAE is in bed with Israel, they're in bed with the United States, they're helping the enemy, this is their position paper as to why they are attacking the UAE. They also blame the UAE for being part of the attacks on their oil facilities on Lavon Island, and that there were Emirati drones involved in the attacks. So that's what's going on there, right? And then you have just more evidence of how they view the American recent actions as weakness. This is from Tasnim, the other major Iranian regime outlet. This is more the IRGC outlet. Kalibaf. This is the top story today, by the way. Kalibaf reacts to fake news about Iran-U.S. talks. And look what it says down in this piece. It says here, I'll just jump to the way the piece ends. Iran has ruled out returning to the negotiating table unless the blockade was lifted. On Wednesday, and amid the Islamic Republic's continued resilience, U.S. President Donald Trump said he was pausing his so-called Project Freedom, a much-hyped plan supposedly aimed at forcibly reopening the Strait. Look, the Trump administration can certainly recover from this, definitely can recover from this, but I have to say that the actions of the last few days, what's happened in the last few days with this Project Freedom failed launch, pause, now they're saying they're going to do it again, it has emboldened the regime. And if it is true that the Americans are still holding out for a deal and they still want to make a deal and they still think that there's someone to deal with, look, there's no such thing as a deal with the Iranians that they won't break. There's no such thing as their word being trusted. There's no such thing as a deal that's a good deal. There is no such thing as that. And what's happening right now, again, this doesn't mean that the Iranians are winning. It doesn't mean that. But it means that for all the great things that have happened, these last few days have been a step back. They have, again, they've emboldened the Iranians. We don't know what kind of help is being smuggled across their border from Pakistan and elsewhere. There could be also, if you think that this blockade is hermetic, it is not hermetic. It's certainly emboldening the regime, everything that Trump is doing right now. Just to give you a window into how they think, they kick the can down the road. They hold fast. The idea of resilience, of holding firm to your position and just holding and holding and holding on, no matter how much you are, you're suffering for it, no matter how much you are, no matter how much you're enduring. When you hold on, that is where the victory comes from. Right? I'm going to read that line again, the key line of this entire video. Let's take a look at it again, because it's just so powerful. Look at what they say there. Maybe I should make it bigger on the screen just so you really see it. Take a look at that. When one side demonstrates a willingness to bear the cost of confrontation, the other side is forced to recalculate, a pattern that had already emerged at the end of the 2-week ceasefire period between Iran and the United States. That is the punchline of this. That gets you right into their head. That gets you right into their psychology. They believe that their resilience is the path to survival. Again, they don't expect to win, but they are holding out. They know Trump doesn't want to go in on the ground, and they know that he's not really going to send in weapons to the protesters. And they know that they still have weapons and they're still on the ground. And even if all the bridges get blown up and all the infrastructure gets destroyed and some of the oil wells get destroyed, no matter how much destruction there is, they've got their offshore bank accounts. They've got their kids in foreign countries. They'll survive. They'll weather the storm. That willingness, as they say it, that willingness to bear the cost of confrontation, that is their strength. They view that as their strongest trait, and they're holding out, and they're seeing Trump, what looks like he's blinking. He's not even punishing the Iranians for hitting the Emiratis, for firing missiles at the Emirates. He's not fulfilling his threat to go back to bombing at the end of a ceasefire that he said he wouldn't extend, and then he did extend. They're seeing all these things, and they are seeing weakness on the American side. It remains to be seen what next steps Trump takes, because again, there's a lot of moves left on the chessboard, and there's still plenty of time and plenty of opportunity to fix the situation. And it remains to be seen how that all looks. So you're hearing some children in the background. I'm at my family's house here in Dallas, Texas, with my cousins, and I'm sorry, my nephew and his children. It's wonderful here, and I'm going to go spend some time with them. Please make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, that you're subscribed to Israel 365 News YouTube channel, and that you go into the link in the description of this video and subscribe to our newsletters at Israel 365 Action and Israel 365 News. God bless.